And we're back. Thank you for returning to the second session. We have Paul Gadi with us, who is a 20-year veteran in the game industry and has a lot of experience developing mobile games. He's worked for companies like Gameloft and Altitude. And so we are going to go through some really basic concepts, but that are worth knowing and studying. It may make you look at the games you're playing differently, and you'll be able to dissect them a little bit to create your own games. Paul will go through his workflow on how to vibe code a game using Claude. Of course, the same techniques will probably apply to any other AI IDE. So let's start with the core loop. And Paul, feel free to jump in if I'm not explaining things correctly. Before joining RFox, who was providing a lot of the tech behind Orange Web3, I was a co-founder of a MMO publishing company in the Philippines and Brazil and India. And we published MMOs. So a lot of my job was identifying that core loop and making sure it was engaging and sticky enough for our users in our markets, because different markets have different preferences. Okay, so right now, this is the most basic concept in game design. But for hyper casual games, it's almost the only thing you need to know. The core loop is really the heartbeat of hyper casual games. So what is the core loop? At its heart, a core loop is the single repeating sequence of activities that a player performs over and over again. In more complex games like G's, they have a series of loops. That loop consists of three basic parts, which is the initial action. For that action, you get a reward. And then there's an investment, or otherwise known as the motivation, to take that action again. And we'll go through some case studies to illustrate this. This loop is the primary experience the player engages with. In hyper-casual games, this loop is designed to be extremely short, immediately understandable, and highly satisfying. And why is the core loop so critical for a hyper-casual game? The success of your game really hinges entirely on the strength of this core loop, because it is the entirety of your game. It's not just the heart of your game, it is the game. Because a hyper-casual game is a single refined loop that is very polished. And the three key principles to keep in mind is simplicity. So this action that you expect the player to take must be immediately understandable. If you go into one of the games on the Orange Games platform, most of them do not have tutorials, because it should be immediately apparent what the action you should take is. And then, of course, instant gratification. The reward they get for taking that action must be immediate, and it must feel good. And then finally, you want this loop to be so compelling that it incentivizes replayability. So if we look at something like Crossroads, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, this is, a very easy game to understand or to see that core loop in action. The action is very simple. All you're doing is going as far as you can, line by line, right? And there are actually two types of rewards in Crossroads, where you get a point for your high score for every line you progress. But then along the map, there are also coins, which you can use in the gacha machine to unlock new characters. And this is the investment or the motivation to make that player go through it again. The Orange Games platform provides that additional motivation of winning Orange token. So we've actually given you that investment or motivation phase of your loop. Let me bring up one of the games from Vibe Coding List to show you a similar game without the gotcha part, but it's still compelling. Hold on one second. So this is a vibe coded game. I think he called it Road Rush 3D. Now you can see, unlike Crossy Road, there are no coins, right? And then it's slightly easier because in Crossy Road, the screen constantly moves up. So you have to move. You are forced to move because if you don't, the game stops. But in this game, it doesn't. So all you have is the score. But there's also a reward in being able to dodge the traffic. In the left-hand corner is the score, but it's still compelling. We had our community play it for an hour because we offered orange token to the winners. Let's go back. Okay. So the next case study we're going to look at is Dunk Shot from the Orange Games platform. I want to show this as an example because it's super simple, right? Okay. The action is you launch the ball into the next basket. There's 3 rewards: the score modifier, and the stars, which you can use to buy customizations of the ball. And now one of the key motivators, and you can also think of it as a reward, is this concept of mastery. Once a player feels like they know what they're doing, they will continue to do it, right? Or to get better at it. But that action has to be predictable. It's predictable but undefined, meaning it shows you the arc, but not the complete arc. You can't necessarily predict where it's going to land unless you keep playing. Once you get the hang of it, you'll start being able to see that other side of the dotted line. And then you get this point modifier if you get a perfect basket, if it does hit the rim. So this is what motivates your player to try to get it into the basket perfect, because that score modifier adds 1 each time. If you hit the rim, it starts back to 1. The short-term motivation is to unlock the balls. Then again, the Orange platform provides the rewards, token rewards. This is really the essential foundation of your game. Part of that is making that mechanic feel good. So this is like controlling the bounce or controlling the speed of your game to make it satisfying. It could even be sound effects, like every time you get the coin, you hear the little ting. When you start designing your game, even though it's going to be fairly simple, you want to look for those parameters or those features that make it feel good. You're just refining the cycle of action, reward, and motivation to go back into the loop. That Orange Games already provides the motivation for you. So you just have to think of the in-game actions and reward, and then we will help you incentivize them to take that loop again. Are there any questions on this?
Just want to add, Phil. I guess if people want to get a feel for games that do these core loops well, one way though is to just see the ads that play when you're browsing Reddit or YouTube. Or maybe, YouTube
Right.
Shorts might be a good way also. I think YouTube has games that kind of show that gratifying core loop really well. And these ads in particular, right? Like they're designed to make you tap on them and interact with them. And so that shows like how they're really designed to be instantly gratifying. If you're using this model to make game, looking at in-game ads is a good way to see other games that do it well.
Actually, even for an established game developer, they might want to think about just extracting the core loop of their game and submitting that to the Orange Games platform because we can monetize it. If you're working on a bigger game, release the core loop of your game on the Orange platform so you can start monetizing and maybe get a little funds to continue development on the bigger game. But you can also get feedback on that core loop. Okay, so I guess we're going to move on to Paul, who's going to show us or demonstrate his workflow and actually developing a game with us.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Great presentation. Let me just share my screen. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As Phil mentioned, I've been making games for quite a while, diving into AI and how it can enable game developers. So today I want to share what my process is. I hope this is going to be an interactive session also, because a lot of this is really in flux, right? So I want to get feedback from people as well. Phil talked about core loops, and I would say it's a really good way to think about designing your game, right? It's a framework which you can use to guide your game design. If you want to go deeper, there's others to take a look at. Like Phil mentioned the mastery thing, right? With the basketball game. So people want to keep playing a game. It enables them to practice a skill. It also gets them into flow. So that's what discussed in flow theory. Variable rewards also, that's why the gotcha component of Crossy Roads, it works really well. Sometimes you get something new or that's already part of your collection. So that chance of getting something variable really, I guess, tickles something in the brain that makes us coming back. And there's other frameworks like the Hope framework and Catalysis framework. Like this works in everything. Right? Some models are very useful, but you can also look at others to complete the picture. Some games, for example, didn't follow the rule. When Minecraft came out, that was such a weird because there was no to-do list. It was just like an infinite world. Wordle also was kind of a weird game. It was actually just made by the developer for his wife. Like he wanted his wife to play this game and it became viral. And Slay the Spire is another game which started the genre, right? It's a weird mashup of card builder and roguelike, and that became something else. But if you can balance the processes of core loops with trying to find something that people haven't seen before, those kinds of games are usually the ones that really make a mark, not discounting all of the core loop stuff, right? That's what makes people play the game and keep coming back. But there's also something that will rely on you as a game designer on what you think you can create that people will love. So
Although I will say, like in all those games, you can still find the core loop of them, right?
So there is a lot of things we can take from tried and tested processes, right, that keep people playing games. I guess that's kind of my conclusion there is that all models are wrong. This is a wrong model as well, but some are useful. So find the useful ones that work for you. That doesn't just apply to game design, but also in apps development, all models are wrong. Some are useful. When I started out in programming, the model was waterfall, showing my age here, like 20 years before people were saying that to make code, you have to plan everything out and then start making any code. And then it started changing towards the agile development methodology, where it was all about Scrum. It was all about 2-week sprints and documentation was kept to a minimum. Now we kind of see the same thing happening in AI. Now there's people who are just vibe coding, just YOLOing their code, right? No planning at all. There are people who are saying that's not the way to do it. You have to plan using tools such as Taskmaster AI. And they're coining a new term called agentic engineering, which is, I guess it's a spectrum of vibe coding to agentic engineering with how much planning you want to do. So things move around and there's really no right way to do it. Yeah, planning does help. You can see it with AI. People who usually run into a lot of bugs, for example, when they plan their work, the AI can do it better. So planning definitely helps, but I would say don't fixate on the methodology, prioritize working code. Similar to the core loop stuff we discussed, there are things here that we can pick and really use and make our processes better. Yeah, and this is a problem I'm seeing. It's the tyranny of choice. There's so many things happening in AI right now. You don't know what LLM to choose, ChatGPT or Claude, what IDE, there's Cursor, Windsurf. Now there's MCP servers, which frankly, I also don't. I haven't fully grokked yet, right? But there's so many of these that are coming out. You can choose which game engine to use, what platform to deploy on, Orange, iOS, Android, so many things you need to decide. I think, at least in my case, it helps when I just took a step back and what's the simplest thing I can start with, right? And in my case, this is also what Tropic has kind of come to the conclusion to. We don't really know how all of this is going to shake out. People are building UX on top of LLMs that are obsolete in the week after, right? So the best thing or the thing that won't change is you interact with an LLM and build your own stuff on top of it. And so that's what I'm going to show today. I'm using Claude, I guess the Claude has several models. So what we're going to be using today is Claude Code on Sonnet or Opus, which is the Max model. I'm just going to be using VS Code to view the code and the terminal mostly to interact with Claude. So it's very simple. It's just an LLM layer along with a UI to interact with the LLM. And it can see all of the project files that you have, all of the code that's part of your game, and it will just do that. Oh, and also like we did discuss game design, so I'm going to show how I used it to do game design. Okay, so before I start with the demo, are there any questions on the presentation?
They're very shy, Paul.
Yeah.
But the techniques you're showing us today would apply to any IDE or LLM. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's a question for everyone. Like, is there any IDE here that anyone is using, like Cursor or Windsurf? I know, Phil, like Replit was kind of the tool that you were using, right?
Yep. If you guys can just drop it in the chat, what tools you're using, just so we have an idea.
Okay. I guess we can start with Claude.
Christian's using VS Code.
I'm also using VS Code. You guys can see me changing screens around, right?
Yep. We got one Replit user and Copilot and Cursor.
Just to hammer home the point about the tyranny of choice, right? Like all of us are using different tooling, but hopefully this will help everyone. Because I purposefully kept it simple, right? So this should be applicable also to how you use your tools. The only difference with Cloud Code, I would say, is they don't want to build UI at all. So for example, here, I'm working out of a directory that has several files, which is the game, and some markdown files. So how you start Cloud Code is you install the Cloud CLI, and then you just type Cloud. And yeah, that's essentially it. It has context, and context means what it can see about your whole project. So in this case, it sees everything here, like all these files. So I can ask it, what is this project? So yeah, so I think this is one also useful thing is you can use LLMs not just for writing code, but for explaining things to you. So I would suggest to make full use of that, right? Like in programming, a lot of work becomes massively better if people pair program. That's also a model I think of when I'm working with AI. I'm pair programming with this AI, so I converse with it. I ask it to explain stuff, and yeah, so yeah, so that's one point. Just don't use it to make code. Sometimes if you're unsure, talk to it and maybe have it provide options.
Oh, you know what? Like that reminds me, when I was working on Replit, I constantly am asking the agent things about the code. So I found out that what I considered a round in my game was different from what it considered a round. And so I was able to, I guess, correct
Yeah.
it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's good to have a conversation with the LLM about your
Yeah.
code.
So what's good with Claude also is you can kind of see what it's thinking, what it's doing. It shows you how many tools it used. So how LLMs work is you give it a prompt, it analyzes the prompt, it thinks of what tools it will use, and then it sends the whole context and sends some context back. So you see these 24,000 tokens, right? That's how much processing power it used and how much it cost to run this prompt rather. So yeah, so it took a look, it understood this is a game development project, and then it kind of saw what the components are. And this is the game that it created called Garden Keeper. I'll show you how it created that. But that's what the project is. So one thing you can do with Claude is there are tasks that you can do, like these ones. I actually haven't run through all of them, but one thing you can do here is you kind of have more access to what the LLM knows. For example, you can ask it what's in your memory. So that's one thing with LLMs is they have this memory that they save. And most of the time you put it in a file called claude.md. That is like a system prompt. So before it does something, it runs a prompt to its Claude MD so it knows the context of what you're doing. Any questions there? If not, I'll go through how it started making this Garden Keeper game. Okay, so this is the project in VS Code. I'm using VS Code to view the code and for me to edit some parts of it. How you would usually start a project on Cloud Code is think of the Claude MD, right? Which is this file that I shared. So you're thinking of what is the system prompt. And in my case, like I actually asked Claude what kind of system prompt would be good for it. I mentioned Phil, like what I wanted it to do was just have a memory of what makes a good game. So I started with a prompt stating, this is what a core loop is. Start doing some research on what kind of Claude MD you would need to have to be able to make a good game. Maybe I can actually show you guys that actual prompt. Before then,
That's,
right? Yeah.
is that the prompt? You are a expert game designer?
Yeah, I can show you the prompt. This actually created that prompt. Yeah. But yeah. So this tool might be confusing, but this is my own tool from another project. I use it to manage my Claude sessions. So I can see the prompts that I have and save it somewhere. But I can show you guys what the actual prompt is. This is actually the right prompt. Oh, it's probably here. It's not here. But that was the prompt. It's like, how did I prompt it? I sent it a link about core loops. Or maybe I can do it right now so you guys can see.
So in this case, Paul, you asked it to research game design practices and asked it to come up with a game based on those design practices.
Not the game yet. I actually asked it to create a claude.md. So it's going to use that as its framework for creating the game. And I can show you that. Oh, here, this is the actual prompt. So create a claude.md that will be able to create games that are as fun and engaging as possible. Do some research first around game design best practices and frameworks such as core loops. And here in Claude, there's an option called UltraThink and Opus. So I'm kind of using the most powerful model of Claude. This whole prompt took maybe 30 minutes. Claude has this web search tool. It went through all of the research on the web, looking at core loops, like top player engagement strategies for video games. So it's like doing it for you. It's not just coding. It can also answer questions with this web search tool, and it can go on the web and do that research for you. So it took a while for it to do this. You can see it research flow theory, research all of that. Bartle's player taxonomy, some of these like I'm not as familiar with. Player types, motivation in games. Yes, it went through all of that, right? And then what it did was to distill that down into a claude.md, which is this claude.md file, which is the prompt field, which is you are an expert game designer, focus on creating fun, and it go through that. What is a core loop? What are engagement mechanics? What is the flow state? This is an interesting formula it found also, which is challenge level equals player skill times 1.1, meaning that like people will keep coming back to play a game if it's a bit harder than what they're usually used to, slightly above comfort zone. So that motivates you to keep playing. To the point earlier that all models are wrong and some are useful. I think some of these can be useful. For example, if you're making a hyper casual game and you're thinking like what kind of players do I want to target, right? Then you can kind of take a look at these. So it made an easy to understand framework. There's also retention strategies, right? This applies for casual games. Short term, people will want to play it. But if you want people to keep coming back, then you need to have that investment pile that you mentioned. So it's kind of this long term, what you can do, like guilds. Like, I don't know if you're going to do that with hyper casual game, but maybe there is a way to do it. Yeah, so it does all of that research. And then my next prompt was, let's go back to the prompting. It's actually here. Okay, so this is our first prompt, which is create a Claude.md. So it already has a Claude.md. I tried using this prompt, but the Claude can't read it. Certain sites don't allow AI to read them. So I stopped that prompt. I just copy pasted this prompt. Maybe something to caveat. I was thinking of what kind of theme would be good for a game that would be successful. How to make a successful game. I found this link on Game Discoverability Substack on how a successful game pick their theme. And I guess indie games, usually they're not targeted towards hyper-casual developers, right? So it's a different methodology. But I think there's something we can take a look at there. Because sometimes indie games transition to the mainstream. Yeah, so I copied all of this, like what their process is. And then I asked it to create another Claude MD under the design folder that you will use when having prompt conversations on deciding what kind of game to make. So the output of that was this file here, which is a game theme selection guide. And it did some research, right? So it said like only 9% of top games account for 80% of revenue. What are the current trending games on Steam, which is buildy, crafty, simulation strategy games. So yeah, so again, like this looked at Steam, which is like the indie games platform. So if you're a hyper casual game developer, you'll probably look at different platforms to look to decide what game to make. Yeah, so it did all of that analysis. Finally, to show the game that we created, I said, using the theme selection guide, research and create design docs for 3 potential games we can create. And I put this assume theme skills relatively new and pattern is for anything. So when you read through the theme selection guide, those are the 2 factors it says. One is choose a theme where you're confident that you'll be able to do it, right? You're not going to do an MMO, for example, if you're just making your first game. So I think a hyper casual game is kind of like the perfect for new game developers. Passion is for anything because that's another one of the factors. If it's something that you're passionate about, you're going to be probably more successful in making a game that's themed around that. And so that's what I put there. So it went through this claude.md file, did some more research, and then it created these 3 games. I prompted it finally to start creating a prototype of the Garden Keeper game. So this evaluation summary suggested Garden Keeper to be the game. It's perfect for building team confidence skills, lowest risk pathway to first commercial success. That's right. So maybe I can just run the game so you guys can see it. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, just chime in. Maybe we can just ask Claude to run the game. Right? So while we wait for that, you can go through the Garden Keeper document. So game concept 1, Garden Keeper, it has a 15-second hook, which is a good way to kind of explain the game really quickly, right? It's Tetris, but you're arranging a magical garden that grows and changes in real time. Visual hook, colorful, hand-drawn garden tiles sliding into place. And it has some example reference games like that were successful. It's making a mistake. One thing with working with AI, right? Like it's not gonna work all the time. Sometimes it's better to just do it yourself. Let's just go ahead and do that. It's inside games, Garden Keeper. And Crystal is really cool. I can share the GitHub of that project so you can play around with it also. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Right. So this is the game it made. I guess Garden Keeper, arrange tiles to create a beautiful living garden. So when you click there, there's this plant that's growing in some way. There's a garden happiness UI there. I don't know what that means. And there's a score, right? So I guess the goal here is you're trying to build the best garden that you can. So it's not that fun yet. But one thing I would say is a lot of games, right? You start with something that works and then start building and iterating towards it. I do feel there's something here that it's a pretty solid foundation. One thing I would start doing next would be to have some sort of challenge. Right now, there's no challenge. You're just clicking stuff and I guess you can see the garden happiness changing. So that's kind of the game, right? You want to know how to put these tiles together to have the highest score and the highest garden happiness. But it's not pretty clear. I guess this is where the core loop stuff will come in, right? Where is the investment? Where's the action not gratifying? And where's the feedback? So now there's not a lot of feedback on what you're supposed to do and what you need to do to become better at this game. But it's playable. There's something there. And the investment part is promising here. But one thing it reminds me of is like Farmville, right? Like when you have a garden or a farm and you're proud of what you've invested into the farm, you share that with people, right? The game becomes more valuable to you because it's something that you've worked on. So this game has a bit of that, but also being a bit casual, right? But honestly, it's not really a game that's going to last yet, right? There still needs to be a game designer, a human in the loop that actually takes it to the next level. Right now, games aren't going to be made in this way. You still have to use your design sensibilities to make it a game that people will play. All right. Anything you wanted to add, Bill, or any questions?
No. So in this instance, you are asking the LLM to help you come up with the game design using certain parameters.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is something you guys can do as well.
Mm.
But you just want to specify that it needs to be a hyper casual. So you can ask the LLM to study hyper casual game design, ask it to research what are the most successful hyper casual games, and then ask it to come up with 3 hyper casual game ideas, which you can work with as a start.
But I guess to your example earlier, right, the game vibe coded versus cross hero, there's still a way to get there. So I predict it's going to make something that's only 80% of the way there, right? Or maybe on 50% of the way there, then you're going to have to keep building.
Tomorrow we'll have JJ from Mythical City Games who can help polish your game. So you'll start basic UI, and then we'll have JJ chime in on how you can polish it.
Cool. And
How to
maybe
make parameters figurable.
like if you want, like I can try putting a prompt here for us to improve the game. And if maybe someone wants to like chime in on what kind of change they want to add to the game. This is also one thing is there's a good way to prompt them. So like I'm sure if you guys write code, you find sometimes your prompts are unclear. Like it does things like what Phil mentioned earlier, where it didn't know what around was, right? So that it's gonna do something wrong. A good way to do this is you're kind of iterating on it and be very clear with it. We're very exploratory, so we're making it create docs. But once you're starting to polish it, then you're gonna have to be more specific on what you want to do. For example, if I put here make it hyper casual, it probably will not do very well. So you're gonna have to guide it towards that.
But like Paul said, it's good to talk with the LLM about your code because you'll learn what the parameters you can play around with. For example, ask it what controls or how do I change player speed, for example, because, that's important. You don't want to be too fast or too slow. So you might need to make adjustments. The best way is to ask the LLM what controls player movement speed.
Okay. That's a fun change you could do. Maybe add a loose condition. So that's pretty vague, but also I think that's enough. And I'm going to change it to Sonnet 4 because Opus 4 is like for complex architecture, right? Let's just do that. Add a loose condition. While I do that, I can share Crystal. It's this tool I'm using to manage the sessions, Phil. The Claude session. It's like a tool for Claude code. So I like it because you can kind of see how Claude goes through all of what it's thinking. With Claude code, you just saw that it's just thinking, it's not saying what it's actually doing. But here you can kind of see what tools it's using. So it's writing code, it's reading code. So now you can see it reading the project. So it helps me understand what it's thinking about.
You can also do this in a general LLM, right? Like I can do the same thing using Gemini Pro and deep research.
And I guess
probably ask it to come up with a prompt that I can use in Replit or to create that MD to have on Replit or Cursor or whatever.
Yeah, I think that also works. One thing I do like about this, it saves all your prompts somewhere in the database. So I can go through all of it. It's saved, like I can move it around. Like it's a file that I can copy. You see, it's going through all of this. It takes a while, right? Now it's still working. But it is a pretty big thing that you have to do. Yeah.
Not sure we're going to have time to see that through.
Yeah, but that's what it does.
Yeah, are there any questions? So this should be a good start on creating or conceptualizing your first game. No questions.
And I shared the Crystal project there. So Bob, yeah, if you want to check that out, it's just in there.
Have any of you started on developing a game?
No, I thought this was the first session.
Cool. I hope this is useful.
Yes, yeah. But okay, I know you already developed a game, so it's totally possible you could be working on a second, right?
Of course. But I have a question though. I'm a bit late to the session, so I guess I would get my answer in the recording, but I'll ask anyway. What editor do you use? Your editor is what?
Paul, the question is, what editor are you using?
I'm using VS Code, Visual Studio Code. Okay. But it's mostly just to edit code, right? You can use anything. And the LLM is Claude code, which is just a CLI.
Okay. Justice.
Yeah.
What's in the CLI? Is it a local element or you install it as an extension?
You can install it. Let me find the link for you. So you install it via running something on the terminal. Let me find it for you.
Christian has a question. How about game asset? Is it also generated by the LLM? I think in Paul's example, those assets were generated by the LLM.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, with JJ, we can ask him how to integrate custom assets.
Actually, that's a good question. It's a rich source of discussion. I find that LLMs aren't really good at generating assets, at least the coding LLMs, right? So with that game, those assets are actually emojis. The best way to do this is not create assets first, just make the design with emojis and other assets that the LLM has ready access to. And then when you're ready to polish it, that's when you add the game assets, because it usually doesn't work well if you have the LLM do it for you. It's better to use another LLM that's better for that.
Most of these AI tools will generate very basic models or graphics. If you're doing something 3D, for example, you'll create images in either Midjourney or even ChatGPT, and then bring it to something like Meshi AI, which will convert it to a 3D asset. Ask the agent how to integrate those things into your game.
Find some game developers use the Flux LLM. Meshi is a good reference also, Phil. Have you tried Meshi? Like how much does it cost?
How much does it cost? I can't remember. I think it was like $20 a month,
Okay.
but you can generate a lot.
Yep.
Even the free tier, I was generating a lot already for Orange Worlds. The only thing is, like, without the subscription, you're stuck with the higher poly counts. Only with a subscription can you get low poly counts, which is something you would need for a web-based game. You need those lower poly counts.
Yeah.
So if you decide to do that, you'll definitely need a subscription.
Yeah. And for 2D stuff also, like actually ChatGPT does a pretty good job already. And it also can do stuff like make it transparent, because in games, right, like you want the 2D asset to be transparent, right?
Actually, on ChatGPT, I've done spreadsheets.
Nice. And it works pretty well.
I actually haven't put it in the game. I have to try that part.
Yeah. If you run into trouble with sprite sheets, like you create the frames into one sprite so that the game can change the animation. If you run into trouble with that, you can ask LLMs to write code for you to display the sprite sheet. Right?
Yeah. The big lesson today is the LLM can tell you how to do most anything.
Yeah.
But only you are going to be able to really identify the proper game feel as a human. But you use the LLM to configure those things.
Yeah, like I find LLMs really don't have taste. Like that's the thing. So it's gonna have to rely on your taste. And it has very weak visual knowledge. So for example, if you're asking it to do UI, it's not gonna be the best. And math, it's actually not that good in math. So you have to find formulas that it can readily use.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much for coming back tonight. And we'll see you again tomorrow. And thanks, Paul, very much.
Of course, yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Tech guys.